Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're doing fantastic today. It's August the 4th, 2026, and I'm currently in Athabasca right now, which is great. Athabasca, not too far from town, and they're going to talk about independence and that sort of thing, so thanks for tuning in. A few things that I want to talk while you guys are online. So first and foremost, there is an event that will happen on September 11th and September the 12th from Econs America. So if you want to get some tickets, there the promo code is Freedom Calendar 10. So Freedom Calendar 10. That's going to give you a 10% off of your purchase, which is great. They're going to have many speakers like Jason Levine, Corey Morgan, the guys from the Critical Compass, and many other people who are very influential in the independence movement as well. So if you want to take a look at this, that would be fantastic. Also, I'm looking for a lot of the events that will happen in the next 72 hours. So there's going to be an event from Kathy Flett's TPA, which is the Alberta Women's Independence Network. I will be streaming in Edmonton. So if you want to take a look and say hello to your artistic internet friends, feel free to do so. And just looking for a couple of things before wrapping this up, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you in a bit.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to this Let's Talk Alberta Town Hall. My name is Christopher Scott. I'm the founder of Let's Talk Alberta, and I'm also the owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. So you may be wondering, why is a guy that owns a cafe up in Athabasca holding a town hall talking about Alberta's future? And my answer is, because I must. Alberta is going through some interesting times right now. We're having some very significant and consequential conversations. And because of that, because we're going to answer an important question this October, I believe that it is critically important for every Albertan to have the discussion at the minimum. Talk to each other and find out where your friends and neighbors are on these topics in this conversation. Listen to what they have to say. And by doing so, we will have the best opportunity to answer the question and have the best future possible for Alberta, for Albertans, for our families. That's the whole purpose of this. We do have very strong personal opinions as to what we want Alberta to look like or what we want the future to look like, and we'll share them with you. And then after a short break, we'll come back and we give you the opportunity to ask questions, to challenge our opinions, to share your opinions with us, because while we want to share our opinions with you, we want to hear from you equally as much, because we're human, we're fallible, we can make mistakes, and if you can present an opinion or facts and evidence to support something other than what we believe, then we want to hear it, because we want to make the best decisions too. So before we start, I just want to let everybody know, I think you already do know, there are exits at the back of the building. There's one there. There's actually one here at the front on the left. And then through that hallway, there's another exit. I believe the front exit is kind of flagged off. They've got some work they've done on the steps, which looks wonderful. And we don't want to be going and putting our footprints on there. Although, do you think anyone knows if I sign my name? I won't do it. I'm just kidding. So that's the emergency exits. Washrooms, again, are down through that hallway and to the right. If you need to hang up your coat, there's a coat room back there. And I think there's some water and some cups over there if you get thirsty throughout the evening. So again, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And like always, I would like to invite my friend Max to open this meeting in prayer, if you don't mind, Max.
So let's open this meeting in prayer. So thank you, Father, for being with us tonight. Bless the speakers who are going to be speaking today. Bless all the people who are here today, including the discussion, bless and also protecting on the way to home, on the way to work as well too. And make sure, Lord, that whatever is coming from this meeting that will be under your honor and under your name as well. In Jesus' mighty name, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay, thank you, Max. So we're going to start off the evening with my good friend, Mr. Shane Meikle. Shane is old as dirt, and wait, no, that's not what I meant to say. Shane is aged, and with his age, he has learned a lot of things, and he's a little bit of a nerd like me, so he likes to read, and he likes to really dig into the facts about Alberta, about Canada, and he has some very interesting things to say. So Shane, come on up. Oh yeah, are you gonna, you need that?
I do, because I can't hold the mic and my notes at the same time.
We all love Shane.
There, that's perfect.
We all love Shane.
Good evening. As Chris said, I like to study history, and what I'm going to talk about tonight is the historical relationship between Ottawa and what is now Alberta and Saskatchewan. So in the 1880s to about 1903, 1904, there was a huge American settler movement. So the Americans were coming up in droves and building communities. How many here have heard of the little spot on the map called USONA? A couple of heads shaking. I live 6 miles from USONA. Do you know what USONA stands for? The United States of North America. That is correct. You must have heard it before. The town of Rimbey. How many here know the town of Rimbey? Almost everybody knows that one. Its original name was Kansas Ridge. The city of Airdrie was Yankee Valley. All throughout what is now Alberta and Saskatchewan, there are towns that used to have names or still have American-sounding names. You've got a place by Camrose called the Dakota Siding, just things like that. They were all named after the Americas. And this made Ottawa very, very nervous. So that was one of the main reasons why they decided that they needed to cut the provinces out of the territories, because it's a lot easier to annex a territory than it is to annex a province. In 1904, Sir Clifford Sifton made the following quote standing on the steps of the Manitoba legislature. "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people to the east, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way to our prosperity." Now, why do we care what some guy said on the steps of the Manitoba legislature 125 years ago? Well, the big thing is that he was the main author of the Alberta Act, which and the Saskatchewan Act. And on September 1st, 1905, Alberta and Saskatchewan were legislated into being. No, they weren't negotiated. They did not negotiate their way into being. They were enacted by an act of legislation. And when they came into being, the very first premiers of both provinces were appointed by the federal government. And has anybody here had the chance to read the Alberta Act? 2 people in the room have read the Alberta Act. I would encourage everybody to go to the Government of Alberta website and download it and take a read of it, because it's only about 6 pages long. And it's a very good read, and it will show you a lot about what they were thinking when they made the Alberta a province. Alberta and Saskatchewan were made provinces in name only. Under the Alberta Act, they got the name of a province, but they got the rights and responsibilities of a territory. We had separated but they kept us the same rights. Been fighting to get provincial ever since. On September, or in 19. Now, what did that do? That made it so that regional railway. So let's say that you were shipping grain from to which one into Stettler, and when you hit the Saskatchewan border, you'd have to unload it, reload it onto a Saskatchewan carrier. When you got to the Manitoba border, you'd have to do the same thing. Same thing at the Ontario border. This made it very hard for regional railways to survive. And by 1939, almost every one of them had gone under. The last one went under in 1971, changed its name, but it had been sold to CN before that. But in 1943, CN, what is now CN, was formed, and they bought up all the assets of those regional railways to form themselves. Now, why is this different for the West than it is for the East? Because they made all Eastern railways exempt when they brought it in. 1930, they brought in the National Resources Transfer Agreement. Now, this was an agreement between all the provinces and the federal government over the resources to the provinces. However, they said very clearly in this that they did not consider that this would affect Alberta and Saskatchewan because they would still control our resources. On December 11th, 1931, the House of Lords in England wrote a statute, and the King signed that statute. And that statute is the Statute of Westminster. And what that did is it transferred all of the land and the sovereignty over land and resources to the people in care of the provinces. Not in care of Ottawa, in care of the provinces. That means that there is no federal land in any province by decree of the King in 1931. So that means that by rights, there are no federal parks. There are no federal land holdings in any province. Now, if we had been enforcing this, things like the Jasper Fire would probably not have happened because we would have been managing the land, and if it did start to have a fire, we could have brought in provincial resources to help fight that fire instead of being held back at the border. 1935, a new marketing board was formed, a voluntary marketing board. We now know it as the Canada Wheat Board. And to begin with, it was supposed to be a voluntary marketing board. It was to help the farmers sell their grain. Well, I've learned that it was even more nefarious than that, because I've talked to several farmers that they shipped their grain with the wheat board in 1936, and they got a bill for the transport and didn't get paid for it. The federal government seized their grain under the wheat board's rules to feed the people in the East during the Depression. So, 1946, it was made mandatory for all Western Canadian farmers. So what did that mean to a Western Canadian farmer? Well, if you were in Ontario and you wanted to sell your grain to the States, you'd pull up to your bin, you'd load your truck, you'd drive across the line, and you'd sell your grain. But if you were east or west of the Manitoba border, you would pull up to your grain bin, you would load your grain, then you'd pull into your local elevator, offload that grain there, pull around to the far side of the elevator, reload your same grain, but pay a profit to the Canada Wheat Board, and then you could sell your grain to the States. Now, this stayed in place until 2012. And in 2012, it was finally, the Canada Wheat Board was finally disbanded. Now, this was due to the fact that many Western Canadian farmers had had enough with it, and 13 farmers in particular decided that it was worth going to jail for. So they ran the border, and they spent between 6 months and a year in jail. I've had a chance to talk to several of those farmers, and what they went through was ridiculous, just for wanting to sell their own grain directly. So finally, in 2012, it was repealed because the backlash against it was so high from the Western Canadian farmers. In 1947, Alberta had just discovered our vast resources of oil. We had known we had oil, but we did not know what kind of quantities we had until 1947. So in 1947, the federal government decided that they were bringing in the federal control of oil pricing and pipelines. So we could not sell our oil for market value. We had to sell our oil for whatever the federal government told us we could sell it for. We could not put a pipeline in place unless the federal government gave us permission to do so. And this stayed in place until 1950 when they finally repealed that law. How many here are old enough to remember the Great Flag Debate of 1965? A quarter of the room. See, I didn't know about that until I was researching years later. But in 1965, Lester B. Pearson, our then Prime Minister, decided that he wanted to make a strictly Canadian flag that represented all the people of Canada. So the red stripes down the sides of the maple leaf represent the oceans. And the maple leaf in the center represents the people of Canada. Now, when this went to debate in Parliament, John Diefenbaker, former Prime Minister and now Leader of the Opposition, stood up and asked him why he wasn't using something such as the Manitoba maple, which is actually found from coast to coast, and not the sugar maple, which is only found in eastern Canada. Well, Pearson did not like this, so he forced closure on the bill, and when it went to vote, not a single Western MP voted for the current flag. And things in the West people in the West were so upset about it that in 1967, just 2 years later, during Canada's centennial celebration, many towns and cities in Western Canada refused to fly the maple leaf. They continued to fly the red ensign, which is still an official flag of Canada. By the time I started school in the early 70s, this has been memory hold. Nobody even knew anything about it. It was always, I salute the flag, the emblem of my country. To her, I pledge my love and loyalty. Never heard anything about the controversy surrounding it. 1973, the federal government brought in the federal oil export taxation policies, and Alberta's oil profits were capped. Now, we were always told that in the 1970s we had an energy shortage. Well, no, it was a policy issue. So if you were an oil company and you had been given by the federal government a cap of 100,000 barrels a day, and you produced 101,000 barrels, and all the profit from that extra barrel went to Ottawa, would you go over your quota? It wouldn't make any sense to. So it was a forced energy shortage. And this stayed in effect for 18 months. In 1974, it was repealed. But they weren't finished with us because just 6 years later, they brought in the National Energy Program in 1980. Now, the National Energy Program had everything that 1973 bill had in it, plus we now had to give priority in sales to Eastern Canada and at their price. So that meant before we could sell to any markets like the United States or anything, we had to sell it to the Easterners, and they set prices that were up to 45% lower than they were for anybody else. So it was almost impossible for oil companies to even make a profit on it. So this stayed in effect until 1988, and it was finally repealed by Brian Mulroney in an election year, but they didn't repeal it because they were so fond of Western Canada. It was repealed because it was costing them more to do it than they were getting out of it, because oil prices had dropped so low that there was no money for them to be made out of it. So in 1988, they finally repealed the National Energy Program. The 1980s and 90s, we had some interesting things happen. First off, in 1982, the Constitution was brought home to Canada. Now, there's some that'll talk about that and go into great detail, but it wasn't necessarily a good thing, because what that did is it got rid of British common law and locked everything into Canadian law. Then in the 80s, we also had the first Quebec referendum, and then in 1995, the second Quebec referendum. Now, we can thank Quebec for the second Quebec referendum, because when that referendum was done in 1998, the federal government went to the Supreme Court and asked them the simple question: can a province actually secede from Confederation? And the Supreme Court came back with a list of things that needed to be done, but yes, a province can secede from Confederation. And so the federal government at the time took those findings by the Supreme Court, took them back, and put them into legislation. And that legislation is known as the Clarity Act. Now, is the Clarity Act perfect? No, by no means is it perfect. But it gave us a basis on which we could do what we're doing now. So then we move forward to 2012. And in 2012, they brought out the Bill C-38, the Job, Growth, and Prosperity Act, which gave Ottawa control over all of Alberta's projects. Under that bill, we can't do a pipeline, we can't do a major highway, we can't do a skyscraper without federal permission. 2016, they brought in the federal carbon pricing. We all know what that's done to our oil industry and the price of goods and services since. 2019, they brought in Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines, and Bill C-48, the tanker ban on the West Coast, were brought in. Last fall, our Premier, Danielle Smith, signed an MOU with our Prime Minister, Mark Carney. Now, was it the greatest MOU? No, but it would have got rid of these four items. Within a week of that MOU being signed, Parliament called a vote on it and defeated it. And many Western MPs voted against it. It was almost unanimous, and that includes the Conservatives from the West that voted against it. So that gives you an idea of what's happening. Now we move to modern time, and it gets even cheerier. So we have got 3 bills. One is already law, and 2 are working their way through the system. We've got Bill C-8. Bill C-8 is the Internet Censorship Bill. What that is by the stroke of a minister's pen, they will be able to wipe you off the Internet if they do not agree with what you say. And when I say wipe you off the Internet, I don't mean just get rid of your ISP. Means your entire presence will be gone from the Internet. You will not be able to do online banking. You will not be able to do anything of that nature. Order Netflix, no Amazon, nothing. You will be off the Internet, and you have no appeal in the process. So if they sign it, you have no way to appeal that decision. Then we've got Bill C-9, which is law now. It's been law now for about 2 weeks. That's the anti-hate speech law. Nobody wants hate speech, but under that, there's no clear definition of what hate speech is. What I'm doing right now, if they deem it's hate speech, it's hate speech. And you quote the Bible at somebody, that's considered hate speech. And it is the law of the land now. Now, our Premier has said that she is instructing the RCMP and the sheriffs to not enforce that law. That's all fine and dandy. But if they deem that I have a criminal warrant, they may not be able to arrest me in Alberta, but I go visit my parents who live in Saskatchewan. Guess what? I'm going to get arrested as soon as I cross that border. Bill C-9 is probably one of the scariest bills that's ever come out of the Canadian legislation. And it is something that everybody should take and read. We're going to have a trifold very shortly on it. It is really, really scary. If you're a churchgoer especially, it goes really after people that of faith. Then you got Bill C-22. And the Bill C-22 is the anti-encryption law. Now, what does that do? Okay, so right now, if they want to tap my phone, let's say they think you and I have a conspiracy going between each other, and they have to go get a warrant to tap our lines to be able to listen to our phone calls. But under the new Bill C-22, they don't have to have any reasoning. They don't have to have a warrant. They don't have to have anything. If they want to listen to my conversations on the internet, they are free to do so. They can go to any provider and tell them that they want access, and they must provide them with access to all my communications. They can go into all my banking statements, which they have to get a warrant for now to do. They can just do it. They can go and they can, any of my online presence, they can go after. This is why many of the big companies like Signal and WhatsApp and the like are saying that if Bill C-22 passes, they're pulling out of Canada. Because it doesn't just affect their operations here in Canada. If they give the Canadian government access to unfiltered access, they can go after anybody in the world. And they're not going to do that. Bill C-22 may sound like they're just going after the big companies, but it's the little person that is going to be affected by it eventually. So, now that I have totally cheered you right up, I'm going to ask John to come up. And the next speaker is Mr. John Riel. And now Chris was saying that I'm as old as dirt. Well, he was rock when I was rock when he was still already dirt. Sorry, I couldn't help the old joke. Hey, if he can use it on me, I can use it on you. John has been involved in Alberta politics for many, many years. And he is actually one of the co-founders of the original Alberta First Party. And he is always interesting to listen to. So I'd like to invite John up here, if he can make it up the stairs. No, I won't make it down. No, no tripping. And no legs to trip.
Now that's a tough act to follow. It really is. Every time Shane speaks, I learn something. Tonight I learned that I'm really old. I was one of the founding members of the Alberta First Party. This was a quarter of a century plus ago. I want to talk about that party for just a second. Anybody remember it? Anybody in here old enough to remember the Alberta First Party? No. Well, yeah, but you're old. The foundation of the Alberta First Party was based on the premise that there is a constitution in Canada, and the Alberta government and the federal government were obligated to follow it, to obey the laws of the Canadian Constitution. Back then, we had the same problems we have now. Louis Riel had those problems when he was addressing the jury that was trying him for sedition that he was convicted of and eventually hung for. What he said back then was that the government or the Council of the Northwest Territories was just as bad as Ottawa, that they paid no attention to anything that the people of the Northwest Territories wanted. Not only did they not pay attention, they never even responded. Nothing has changed. Now, the Alberta First premise back then was we wanted the Constitution to be followed. Does that sound like a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada? Kind of does, doesn't it? That's what Danielle Smith was proposing a while ago, a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, which is just another way of saying we want the people in the federal government and the people in the provincial government to follow the law. Well, we don't follow the law in this country. Now, I could go over all sorts of things, financial and electorally, that are contrary to our Constitution. I could tell you, for example, excuse me, I could tell you, for example, that 7 out of 10 provinces in Canada rely on equalization to fund their budgets. I can tell you that the maritime provinces, with the exception of Newfoundland, I'm talking about Maritimes here, not Newfoundland. By the way, just as an aside, do you know that Newfoundland exports 1.5 billion barrels of oil a year? Did you know that? Did you know they have no carbon tax? Not one. Did you know they don't have a tanker ban? That's only for us. Anyway, the 3 maritime provinces get between 21 and 26% of their annual budgets from equalization. Quebec gets only 8.7% of their budget from equalization. Now, the thing you might not realize is that 8.7% is $13.95 billion this year. Just as an aside, just so you know. Now, when you look at the totals that the individual provinces get in equalization and add them up, it's almost dollar for dollar the amount of money that Albertans pay in taxes and get nothing in return for. So that tells you that the bulk of the equalization, almost 100% of it, comes out of your pockets through taxation. The other 2 provinces that get $0 from equalization are Saskatchewan and BC, but at least they're getting back what they pay in taxes in services. We don't. One other thing I'd like to mention is that have any of you ever heard of a windfall tax? Do you know what a windfall tax is? Do you know what a windfall is? A windfall, well, other than, something blowing trees around, a windfall is more money than you expected to get. Now, right now, we have a Prime Minister of Canada that went to British Columbia and said, Alberta wants a pipeline. They want to run another pipeline alongside the TMX route and pump some more oil out through the west coast through Vancouver. And Premier Eby said, yeah, that's a great idea. How much do we get? Well, turns out that you can't really increase the price of transporting the oil because the oil companies won't pay it. It's too expensive. They'd lose money. So where's that money coming from? Would you believe a share of Alberta's royalties? Now, I want you to think about that. When our Prime Minister wants to share the earnings that we get from our resource, what is that? That's nationalizing what we own. It's taking money out of your pockets and my pocket to pay somebody else. Now, let's just go right on to something else real quick. In Ontario is the home of 47% of Alberta's unemployed. 47%. Almost half the unemployed people in Canada live in Ontario. Why? You might look at the auto industry in Ontario, which is functioning at less than 50% of what it was 2 or 3 years ago. They're in trouble. Now, have you heard that Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, has just said, gee, a pipeline from Alberta to Ontario is a great idea. Well, maybe it became a great idea when he discovered that BC gets to take some money off the top of transportation when the oil goes through their province. So he wants a piece of the action as well. Why? Because they're in real trouble. Did you know that 9 of the 10 provinces in Canada are in recession? Guess which one isn't? Oh, gee, look at that. Somebody knows that. So here's my point. Right now we have a premier in Alberta who some short time ago expressed a desire to have a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things, but first I want to make very clear, I am not anti-Canadian. I'm a former member of the Royal Canadian Air Force and a former officer in the Canadian Army in the Communications Command. I put my name on the dotted line to serve my country. My country is Canada. I love Canada. Now, I want to tell you that I think we can save Canada. Now, I have a personal opinion about that. Do you want to hear it? Okay, don't get mad at me for this, all right? I don't know how many of you are Forever Canada and how many of you want an independent Alberta and how many of you are undecided. I don't know. But I will tell you this, the way that we save Canada is we leave. Now, the reason I say that is because you may very well know, well, thank you, both of you. I didn't know my wife and mother were here. I'll tell you why I believe that, and I tell a short story about that. Let's say that you're married, and you're all by yourself. You're empty nesters. Your kids have all gone, and you have a lovely home and a nice basement suite. And along comes your brother-in-law, and he says, "Gee, my wife has left me." Well, that's too bad. We feel sorry. Oh, well, wait a minute now. I lost my job. Well, gee, the things are really good. Well, closing on my house. For a little while. So you say, sure, come on, stay for a while. Your family will look after you while you get back on your feet. And one day you go up to make breakfast and you find out there's no bacon in the fridge and there's no eggs. Turns out your brother-in-law has hack. Brother-in-law may be just on the fridge, and when you eat something, it's all gone. The fridge, it says we need to buy more. He's playing a video game in your basement suite. Then you realize he's been living in your basement suite for 5 years. Come on, what do you do with him? You kick him out. So here's my point. We have 7 out of the 10 provinces in Canada who are at the tit of equalization. Used to have a really solid industrial base way back when. It was destroyed by Central Canada for the same reasons that they did with Western Canada. They wanted all the manufacturing and all of that good stuff to be taking place in Central Canada. So what that did was they created Newfoundland used to have a heck of a fishery. Thank goodness it's coming back now, and thank goodness they have oil, so we won't count them in that have-not province area. So the federal government used the same type of laws to restrict what was going on in the Maritimes as they used for the Western Canada. So now we have a situation where in our country, equalization is in our Constitution now, right? You all know that. It's in our Constitution. The amending formula for our Constitution is 7 out of 10 provinces with 50% of the population. We have 3 provinces, 4 provinces counting Quebec, who really, really benefit from equalization. Do you think they will ever vote for a constitutional conference to amend equalization? So like your brother-in-law, all of these in Quebec, for example, they got almost $14 billion this year. Do you know that they have millions, tens of millions of cubic feet of natural gas under their surface? Did you know that? Did you know that they have millions of barrels of shale oil in Quebec? Now, tell me something. Has anybody ever heard of them actually developing it? No. So, and in the maritime provinces, they do have access to American markets in the American Eastern Seaboard. If they had industry there, they would have those people as customers. But the tariffs that Central Canada arranged with Maritimes prevented them from actually developing those industries. So if we leave our $23 billion of equalization that we pay and don't get anything back for, will leave with us, what's going to happen to the maritime provinces? What's going to happen? They got between 21 and 26% of their budget comes from equalization. What's going to happen with them? They're going to do just like your brother-in-law. They're going to find work. If that means they have to leave Nova Scotia and New Brunswick or Prince Edward Island to go to work in British Columbia or Alberta or Ontario, they're going to do it, which Newfoundlanders did in droves over the last couple of decades. I mean, you go up to Fort McMurray, and you better speak with a Newfoundland accent. That's how many people were up there from Newfoundland. They would survive, and the way Canada survives is for Alberta to turn off the tap. Now, I'm going to close with one other thing. I used to have lots of information and lots of facts that I presented in these talks. Like, for example, did you know that we have more land? If we were to be an independent nation, we would have more land than almost 80% of the other countries in the world. We would be bigger than almost all of the other countries in the world. Did you know that we would have more farmland in Alberta than 90% of the other nations of the world? 90%. We'd have more farmland than 90% of the other nations in the world. We would have a larger GDP than 80% of the rest of the nations in the world, and we'd have a higher per capita GDP than 97% of the other nations of the world. Now, here's the bottom line is this. When we have a federal election, your vote doesn't count. It does not count. I don't care whether you say mine counts because I voted Liberal, and the Liberal's the government, so my vote, no, it didn't. Because before they even start to count the votes from Manitoba West, the election is already declared. Doesn't matter what we do. So we're supposed to live in a democracy. What's a democracy? Democracy is government works for the people, government is decided by the people make the choice and make the decisions. We have no decisions. So we will not have any decisions, no power to make those decisions unless we make changes. Now, we have a lot of people who will say to me, well, let's just enter into negotiations with the federal government, and we'll get those things. Well, Louis Riel tried that in 1885. Didn't work. And the Western provinces have been trying that every year from that time until now. We tend to think that the problems in Canada started 10 or 15 years ago with the second Trudeau. They started 120 years ago, 130 years ago, back when the Northwest Territories were not provinces, and they haven't changed. So there's two things that we need. The first thing is when we elect politicians to our provincial government, we need to make sure that their priority is Alberta and Albertans. When I was at Shane was with me at that meeting on Wednesday night. Where are you, Shane? He's gone. He doesn't want to hear me. I don't blame him. One of the people who were asking questions of Premier Smith actually invited people in that room, and there were several hundred in that room, to stand up if they wanted an independent Alberta. Over 80% of the room stood. 80%. Now, I'm not saying that throws all of these polls that they're doing into the garbage. What I am saying is that when Premier Smith said, who's for a united Canada with Alberta in it, about 15 or 16 people stood. Now, what that tells you is not necessarily that all of Alberta wants this. What it does tell you is that the base that supports the UCP government in Edmonton wants the Edmonton government to be concerned with Edmonton, Calgary, here, everywhere in the province. They want that government to represent Alberta and Albertans, not the federal government. We do not, and I'm not campaigning against Danielle Smith here. She's done a lot of good things. A lot of the things that she identified they'd done in that meeting, I'm really impressed with. She's done a pretty good job in some areas. But I have come to believe that my support of Danielle Smith has now become conditional. When I say that, it's conditional upon her doing the best thing for Alberta and Albertans. If she can actually create enough leverage to get the federal government to bend and make your votes count in federal elections, to make our voices count in federal election, I'll go shake her hand and kiss her feet. But she better start doing that. And when you vote for your local, they better have the best interests of Alberta and his constituency or her constituency in their mind when you send them to Edmonton. We elect politicians to go to Ottawa. Their job is to look after Canada. We elect politicians to go to Edmonton. Their job is to look after Alberta. So regardless of whether you're forever Canada or you're for an independent Alberta or you're somewhere in between and haven't made up your mind yet, that is the single most important thing that you can do right now, is to make darn sure that the people we send to Edmonton are Alberta first, because that's their job. We don't elect them to look after Canada. We elect them to look after Alberta. And I'll just a couple more minutes. I know I'm boring you, okay? But a couple more minutes. Quebec, Ben Trudeau, who's a member of the Trudeau family, but a distant branch from the bozo that was around for a dozen years here. And I said this to Premier Smith at that meeting, is that Ben made a statement that I think is absolutely correct, and it's important, and its import on us is fantastic. His statement was this: you want sovereignty in Alberta, you want the Constitution to be obeyed, you want your voice to be heard. His comment was this: sovereignty is not given. Nobody in Ottawa is ever going to give us sovereignty, whether it's within Canada or without. Sovereignty is taken. Okay, think about that. Sovereignty's taken. So if you want Alberta to be successful, if you want your votes to count, then we need a government in Edmonton that is willing to grasp that concept of sovereignty and insist on it. Now, Quebec has done that. You know, I used to hate Quebec because, gee, they're divisive, they're this, they're that, the other, they think they're self-important, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? They force the federal government to abide by the Constitution. When Shane talked about the Clarity Act, the Clarity Act is nothing more than an attempt to put roadblocks in front of the independence process. It's designed to stymie the independence movement. It's not there to clarify. It's there to stop, to create problems. So, you know what Quebec did with the Clarity Act? Anybody know? I know, Chris knows. The day after the Clarity, and Shane knows, the day after the Clarity Act passed, there was in the Quebec National Assembly, because they're a distinct society, they passed a resolution or a law or whatever you want to call it that stated very clearly the Clarity Act doesn't apply in Quebec. In other words, they said they will abide by the Supreme Court's decision on independence for a province, and the Clarity Act can go wherever they want because they're not interested in it. Now, I'm glad to be here. I'm not going to tell you how to vote on October 19th, but I will tell you this. When you think that we've been in Confederation since 1905, and when you think about the situation that the Northwest Territories was in prior to that, when you look at everything that's happened since then, particularly what Shane has talked about, nothing has changed. So whether you're for a united Canada, an independent Alberta, or a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, unless we make it clear to the federal government that we're not happy, nothing's going to change. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I just walked off the stage and I forgot about Chris. You know, Chris was here. He talked to you a little bit before we started. I admire this man wholeheartedly. He has all of the energy of youth. He has the curiosity of a dozen cats. He does very detailed research about a lot of things, and he knows some stuff. I know some stuff too, but it's only because I'm old. He knows some stuff because he goes looking for it. And I'm impressed with what you know. I'm also impressed with your capacity to communicate that, and you folks are really going to enjoy this.
Let me take this one? Yeah. Sorry. I don't like to have anything in front of me because I don't want people to accuse me of being computer generated. So now you can see that I exist. Well, thank you very much, Shane, and thank you, John. I want to remind folks that we're going to have a Q&A. You're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions. So if you're worried, like I always am worried, that you're going to forget what your question is, tell your neighbor. Like, do it right now so that you don't forget your question. That's my favorite part of the whole night. Oh, good. We're going to have some questions. That's awesome. Okay, so first of all, I want to start with explaining to you folks how I'm here completely by accident. I never intended to ever be on a stage with a microphone. I never intended to do town halls. I never intended to have a podcast. I'm a fairly private individual. I don't particularly like crowds. I used to say I don't like people, but I like people. I'm not a crowd person. I'm fairly shy. I'm quite introverted. So for me, this is completely out of character. And it's been 6 years since this started. But something happened to me in my life that forced me, it was kind of like reality slap in the face, it forced me to start learning. And I do love to learn. I forgot how much I loved to learn after I got out of high school, because then it was, I just want to make money, buy a car stereo, and date these girls. That's what, I mean, a young man, that's what we do. We kind of forget about everything else. But when I found myself in a situation where I had to start learning about who I was, what Canada is, what Alberta is, what our Constitution is, what the Charter of Rights and Freedoms really means, what the judicial system is, how government works, how they're supposed to work independently to protect us, but really it's a trap. I had to learn all these things because I was staring down the barrel of the government, and it doesn't matter which side of that conversation you're on. I stood up to the government and what they did to Albertans during the pandemic. I went one whole year closing my business, opening my business, watching the ridiculous things happen, dousing myself in sanitizer, doing all of the things that the government told us that we needed to do to be safe. And at some point I realized, you know what, the government's not perfect. I should be questioning the government more than society seems to be right now. And so I'm going to start learning some things. What I learned told me that what the government was doing to us wasn't right. So I stood up to the government. And anybody should be able to do that. If you believe what the government is doing is wrong, if you believe what they're doing is immoral, you should be able to speak up, protest, stand up against what the government's doing, regardless of what side of the conversation you're on. And that's not to say that you should be able to just do whatever you want and you know, make an absolute you know, chaotic mess of everything, but you should be able to speak and protest. So I ended up actually going to jail for protesting on my land that I held title to peacefully, wasn't breaking any laws. I was protesting government policy, and I was arrested for that. Now, when something like that happens to you, you end up with a little bit of time on your hands because you're sitting in jail. And the jail cell that I was sitting in, it wasn't any of those nice cells you see on TV. It wasn't like the blue-collar prisons that you see on the crime shows. I was in the drunk tank for 4 days. No shower, no nothing, same contacts, same clothing. The last day, I heard some commotion outside of the cell and some expletives as the RCMP officer that came on duty realized I'd been sitting in there rotting for 4 days and I hadn't been given anything. They were quite upset about that. But I had a lot of time to think. And as I laid on that cold concrete, mind you, I had a 1/2-inch foam mat, as my back was straightening out, which was a very big blessing, it really made me question how I got there. How is it that as a Canadian, I could be in jail for protesting on my land that I held title to? Turns out I hold title in right of the king, which is a different story. I had to ask myself, as a Canadian, how in the world is it that I can say to you, I'm a Canadian, and I had to hide from the government to go to church? I'm a Canadian, and I had to attend meetings for political purpose to try and change the political landscape of Alberta. I had to do it in secret. Because if I had been found, I would have been arrested. Actually, yeah, at that time I would have been arrested. If you're like me, and you grew up believing that this is the freest country, it's amazing to be here, it's always going to be free, somebody fought and died for you so that you could be free, and then you start to experience some of those things, the way you think changes. And you have two options. You can either decide to say, screw it, I'm out of here, and I'm going to go somewhere where I really have that freedom. Or you start learning. And you start digging into it, and you find out, why is it like this? Why isn't Canada the way that I thought it was when I was a kid? And what I found was, it gave me hope. Because what I realized was, Canadians have never done one very, very important thing. No matter what side of the conversation on independence you're on, Canadians have never, ever come together and had a conversation and decided what rules they agree to be governed under. Did you know that? Canadians have never, ever written a constitution that tells the government how they may behave, how they must behave. We have never written a document that gives our government the guardrails that are in, for example, the United States Constitution. Now, this might come as a shock to you because we had the British North America Act, which became our Constitution in 1982, incorporating the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right? That was Canadians that did that, right? Wrong. The British North America Act was debated, written, and enacted in a foreign country. It was done in England. It wasn't done in Canada. John A. Macdonald and some others, including Georges Etienne Cartier and a couple others I can never remember, they actually went to England, they sat with the Crown's representatives, and they penned the BNA Act. And the BNA Act is what allowed Canada to unify under some common authority so that we could be peaceful, orderly, and have good government. It was a document drafted by somebody else imposed on the Dominion of Canada. Now, I'm not going to say maybe that wasn't appropriate at the time. I mean, we had bigger things to worry about than political documents, right? We were building hats out of them, and we were settling the West, and we were negotiating treaties, and we were doing all sorts of things. Maybe we didn't really have time, and maybe it was okay that it was done that way. But then in 1982, when the Constitution came home to Canada, when the British North America Act came home to Canada as our Constitution, and we were given the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, everything changed. And you, like me, may believe, and you may know, and there's a difference between believing and knowing, because knowing, you get an emotional response when someone tells you you're wrong, which you might about to get. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms changed everything. That first paragraph at the beginning of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, these rights and freedoms are guaranteed to every Canadian unless demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. That section 1 changed everything. It gave our courts the ability to interpret and make laws on behalf of government. It completely flipped the script from the British common law judicial system that we lived under before, that really, for all its faults, it starts off with the premise that you have rights, and your rights don't end until they collide with somebody else's. Do no harm. Don't hurt other people. You can do what you want. Don't hurt other people. Now we live in a country where the Supreme Court can interpret something, and the outcome of their interpretation could have completely different meaning than the legislation, than the spirit in which it was enacted. And we saw that in Alberta. We had a piece of legislation that was designed to allow the citizens to compel the government to hold a referendum on things important to us. That's great. We should have that. When we believe that a conversation needs to be had, when the government won't do something we want them to do, it's our duty to stand up as citizens, build a grassroots movement, and compel the government to do what we want to do. Because for better or for worse, it doesn't matter what job we have, we first protect ourselves in that job, and then we do the job. And our politicians are no different. If you want to know more about my thoughts on that, I just wrote a blog on it. I published it yesterday, whistlestoptruckstop.ca/blog. It's called something like Why Our Politicians Will Never Lead an Independence Movement. And my theory is, what I've seen is, our politicians in Alberta seem to always be looking at something better. We don't pay our MLAs very well, by the way. They don't get a pension. And I think these are two issues that we have that cause the people that are supposed to be advocating for Alberta and Albertans, both here in Alberta and within Confederation, at something over there. The grass is greener in Ottawa. The wages are way higher. They get a pension after six or 8 years, something like that. Do you get a pension after 8 years? It's very beneficial and lucrative, and it's a huge incentive for our provincial politicians to eyeball Ottawa and not do what they know is best for Alberta because they get something better. And I'm not saying that they do this on purpose. Human nature, we tend to follow the incentives. We tend to see the grass is greener, the carrot dangling, and we go there, even though sometimes we might believe that we're acting in the best interest of everyone. No, we don't. We don't. So anyway, things changed, and we ended up with a country where our courts, who are supposed to be the interpreters of the law and be fair and balanced between the people and the government, our courts are now used, and I've experienced this, as a weapon against us from time to time. So what happened to me was I said, government, what you're doing is wrong. And the government said, no, you have to do it because I say. And I said, okay, well, prove it to me. Show me some evidence that suggests what you're saying is true, and I will listen to you. And they said, we don't have to. So then I said, well, then I'm not going to listen to you because I know what you're doing is wrong. And then they went to a judge without me, by the way, or my lawyer. They actually told the judge that I didn't have a lawyer, which was untrue because they were dealing with my lawyer. And they said, we need an injunction against this guy because he's going to harm Albertans. And the judge said, well, how is he going to harm Albertans? And the lawyer said, well, he's going to get everybody sick and they're all going to die because he's selling hamburgers. And the judge said, okay. And issued an order. But get this, the judge didn't just issue an order against me. By that time, I had a pretty big following. And I was advertising that we're going to have a protest. I mean, this is going to be the protest. There's going to be brisket and pulled pork and hamburgers, and we are going to protest. And instead of that injunction coming to me, the injunction said the respondents were Christopher Scott, Glenn Carrot, a couple others, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, John Doe and Jane Doe. Any Albertan. It doesn't matter if you agreed with me, you had an injunction issued to you that would have got you charged with contempt of court and put in jail just like me had you not done what the government said. That is crazy. With the stroke of a pen. Now, prior to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, with that demonstrably justified, governments could do that. But they had to meet a very high bar. They had to prove in court before they interfered with your rights, which is the way it is supposed to be. The government is not your king. The government is not your ruler. The government is not your daddy, no matter how much you want them to be, you weirdo. The government is supposed to work for us to do the things that we want done, to fix the potholes, to enact laws on our behalf, not to enact laws on their behalf that shields them from being sued when they do something that harms us. And so as I'm learning all these things, I'm remembering some things that my grandfather talked about because the family farm was in Ribstone, just north of Provost. And back then he was born in the 30s, so he would have been farming in the 30s and 40s, 50s, whatever. They experienced a lot of these things that contributed to Western alienation, not alienation, alienation. Western inequality with the rest of Confederation. And so I heard these things as a kid, like why Alberta? Alberta should have never been part of Canada, he would say. Alberta was different. As Shane described, Alberta was very U.S. dominated. Most of the industry up here was U.S. The people that came up and settled, they were U.S. citizens. We had more in common with the U.S. than we did with Canada. Not to say that I want to join the U.S., but I'm just trying to say that if Alberta had been asked in 1905, do you want to become part of this confederation under these terms, nobody in their right mind would have said yes. There was a few influential business owners in Edmonton that advocated for the Northwest Territories to be split up into provinces and brought into confederation because it worked out very well for them. But the average person, if the government had said, if Canada had said, hey, Alberta, Mr. Alberta farmer, we want you to join our confederation. Well, what's confederation? Sounds like federation. Well, no. Confederation is actually opposed to a federation. We want to have a loose association of sovereign states. That's what confederation means. Con means against, federation means together. Against being together. We want to work together, unified towards the same goals, which is freedom, peace, prosperity, but we don't want to be in each other's business. That's what federation is. Well, that sounds pretty good. Okay, great. We're going to bring you into this confederation. And you can only sell your wheat to this Crown Corporation. And if you sell it to anybody else, even though that's your property, we're going to put you in jail. Well, that doesn't sound very good. And by the way, we're going to call you Alberta. We're going to severely underrepresent you in the Senate. We're going to give you 5% of Senate seats. And we're going to appoint all those senators from the Governor General is going to appoint those senators on the advice of the Prime Minister. Okay, what's a senator? Well, don't worry about that. Now we're going to give you this many voices, this many seats in the House of Parliament, the place we come to speak, the place where your elected representatives will come to advocate for you. We're going to give you this many seats. Well, how many are you going to give us? Well, we're going to give you 36. Well, how many do other people have? Well, they got 300. Okay, so that means that the Senate's going to balance out and be the last stop if there's something that doesn't benefit us and we won't get steamrolled. No, that's the way it's going to be. And by the way, we're going to make sure that the standard of living is roughly the same all over Canada. Is it? Is it? It's not. So what we're going to do is we're going to collect your taxes for you because you're infants and you can't do it. And they still do that to this day, by the way. We're going to collect your taxes. We're going to collect our portion of the taxes. We're going to collect the GST. And then we're going to give you some money back. And what we give back is going to be, let's say, somewhere between $21 and $30 billion less than what you we collect every year. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. These terms don't sound very good to me. And they don't sound very good to you, regardless of what side of the conversation you're on. So if Alberta was asked in the beginning if we had had a referendum or a plebiscite, which we didn't, and these things have been told to us, this is the way you're going to exist within Confederation. We're going to tax you, and we're not going to represent you. We'll represent you, but we're not going to listen to you. And then we're going to legislate things that actually kneecap your industry. Athabasca, I worked in Wabasca for years, before things got really crazy. And there was some prosperity. We did some amazing things there. We built some amazing things. Albertans, like the opportunity that is here is just, it is almost unfathomable. And then the federal government comes in and they do these things that cause problems for us and we can't stop it. And that's my issue. This is where I've landed. The laws may be bad in a democracy. But in a democracy, you're supposed to be able to advocate for a change, advocate for a cause, be a leader, bring people with you, and make the changes. That's what we're supposed to be able to do. Alberta has never been able to do that. Alberta will never be able to do that. You are about to see the strongest evidence that you have ever seen to support what I just said with the 2 pipelines that are being talked about right now. We may get them, we may not. It doesn't change the fact that we had to beg for them for 20 years. 20 years. In 1905, a small little country called Norway and another country called Sweden decided they no longer wished to be governed under the same laws, and they separated. On paper, they just talked about it, they had the conversation, they agreed to disagree, we're going to self-govern. The other thing Norway did, years later, is they decided we're going to be responsible. We're going to start saving. So around the same time that Canada was legislating the equalization scheme, Norway started what they call their oil fund. Since equalization started, if you adjust for inflation, and I support this in my writing, you can find this at whistlestoptruckstop.ca/blog and some of those trifolds at the back. If you adjust what Ottawa has collected from Alberta since equalization started, and what we have received back in cash or equivalent transfers, we have hemorrhaged $1.2 trillion to Confederation without being able to effectively influence policy or legislation. All while the election was called before our ballot boxes were opened. $1.2 trillion. Do you know what Norway did? They started saving. Do you know how much their oil fund is worth today? $1.3 trillion. $550,000 per citizen of Norway. What could Alberta have done if Alberta had stood up for itself in 1965? We talk about pensions now. We talk about old age security. We talk about federal entitlements. We talk about the things that many people in this room depend on. That is a very important conversation. What's going to happen to our pension? What's going to happen to our OAS? What about what about the social safety nets? Smaller countries than what Alberta would be if we decide to be independent manage those things, and they manage those things very well. Some of them are even landlocked, believe it or not, and they're very prosperous. Some aren't landlocked, and they don't prosper like Venezuela. What would your lives look like today if Albertans had taken control of their futures in 1965? Now I want you to ask yourself another question, and this is the most important question of the night. Some of you in this room, maybe myself included, we won't be here in 30, 20, 40 years, whatever. Some of us will. In 40 years, what question do you want to be asking? Do you want to be asking, what could Alberta have been if we had had this conversation in 2026 on the cusp of a question of self-determination? What if we had that conversation and we took control of our wealth and affairs and we started planning and we were responsible and we pursued human flourishing and prosperity to the benefit of our children? Do we want to say that's when we started this fund that's now worth $3 trillion? That's when we decided that our kids wouldn't have to worry about retirement, because every citizen of the nation will have $500,000 of this oil fund. And I'm not saying that they get it. I'm just using it broken down by citizen. This is the importance of the conversation Alberta's having right now. And it doesn't matter if you believe that Canada is the right path and staying in the status quo is the right path, or you believe that Alberta should become an independent nation. The conversation needs to be had. At the beginning of this evening, I was surprised to hear the speech delivered by the renter of the building. But I'm not surprised, because my views, don't ever assume that anybody that's associated with me even shares my views, because they all don't. They don't. But my view is that the conversation is critical. And here's why. Since 1990, there have been 38 new nations formed. 38. 80% of those new nations formed did so peacefully with pens and paper. They didn't do it with bullets, they didn't do it with swords, they didn't do it with fighting. That's the way we do things now. In the last 100 years ago, there was 50 nations, roughly, on Earth. There's 183 now. This conversation is nothing new. It's been done 38 times since 1990. The vast majority of the new nations have been very successful in their endeavors. Some are smaller than Alberta. Some are landlocked. Some don't have oil. But when people decide that they're going to take control of their future and they're going to manage their wealth and affairs, and they will be the ones that benefit or suffer the consequences of their decisions, things get better. And that is why, historically and naturally, nations get smaller, not bigger, because as society grows, people change, and their differences aren't compatible. And at some point, there has to be a relief valve. And a referendum is the relief valve. That's where people, once and for all, get to say either, yes, let's stay, or let's have another discussion. And the reason why you folks have that opportunity, and 80% of those other nations had the opportunity to have that conversation and answer a question of self-determination without bloodshed, is because people bled. Before 1990, we didn't get this opportunity by having a town hall and petitioning our government and walking into a ballot box and picking up a pen and putting a mark on there. Read the instructions, by the way, very important when you vote for anything. Don't draw happy faces. Don't write things. Read the instructions. We have that opportunity, and over the course of history, hundreds of millions of people have died in the pursuit of that question. And here we are in blessed Alberta with the biggest opportunity that a people can ever have to answer a question of self-determination, and we barely have to lift a finger. Well, some of us, we're going to lift a lot of fingers. Hopefully not the middle ones, although they come out from time to time. We're going to do the work because we understand, those of us in Let's Talk Alberta and the army of volunteers with us, we understand what it means to be asked this question. We understand how critical it is that we make sure we're informed and we talk to each other and we listen to those who have opposing views. My viewpoint, my opinion, is that Alberta independence is not only necessary, it is inevitable. That is my opinion. I invite you to challenge me. Because, like I said before, I am human, I'm fallible, I'm not perfect. And if you believe I'm wrong, please educate me. Tell me why I'm wrong. Change my mind. Because on October 19th, I am going to do my civic duty, my moral obligation, honoring the sacrifices that other people made so that I do it. I'm going to walk into that ballot, and I am going to place my mark on a spot in that ballot that supports my opinion. And up until then, I'm going to tell people what my opinions are. I'm going to back it up with facts. I'm going to make trifolds and booklets. Thank you for taking the booklets. And I'm going to let people know exactly why I think the way I do. I will lead. If people want to follow, I'll do whatever I have to do. And I'm telling you, by speaking the truth and backing up what I'm saying with facts and with evidence, I'm going to bring a lot of people with me. So if you truly believe that the status quo is best for not only you, but your children and your grandchildren, you better speak up. And you better prove me wrong, because I'm going to keep doing this until October 19th. And then I'm going to vote. Whether or not you agree with me, my opinion, engage civically in this. No matter what. Don't sit it out. This is history. And it's not history we can afford to lose. Now for the really difficult conversation. It's the hardest part of the night. I see Shane standing there with a very intimidating yellow bucket. Kind of reminds me of when you're sitting in church and those men walk up beside you and they've got these plates and you're like, oh no, I don't have any change in my pocket. And then the piano starts playing and they pass it around and they're asking you to support what they're doing. This is kind of the same thing, only it's not church. The reason we're able to do what we're doing, the reason why that big, beautiful bus is parked out there with that beautiful Alberta mural on it, is because of people like you. This is a completely grassroots movement. A grassroots movement is what the people have to do when the government won't do the things they want them to do. So if you want to support Let's Talk Alberta, and you can, please do. Don't drop your change on the ground. If you don't want to or you can't, you don't have to. Don't feel compelled to. But the more we can raise doing this, the more people we can reach. And I can tell you, it is a little bit painful being an Albertan, knowing how much energy we produce in Alberta, going to the fuel pump and spending $840 to fill the gas tank, the diesel tank. $840. Do you think that in Alberta, a senior retired that buys a motorhome and wants to drive around and see the country should have to spend $840 to fill up the tank? Do you believe that that's acceptable? This is just one of the opportunities Albertans have. Quebec already does it. Quebec does it with their hydroelectricity. The people in Quebec, they pay a reduced subsidized rate on their electricity, and that money that they don't collect for the electricity leverages their balance sheet and allows Quebec to receive more equalization. Did you know that?
Why don't we do that?
Why don't we do it? This is one of the big questions that I've had for years. Why is Alberta not taking the sovereignty that we can right now? I'll tell you, it's not because they're stupid. It's because we haven't made them do it. Now, Here's a real interesting thing. If you are you're against my opinion that Alberta independence is necessary and inevitable, and you want things to change, and you want our government to start doing the things, everything they can do to put Alberta first and start acting like a sovereign Alberta within United Canada, you know what the most effective tool that we have to accomplish that is? A referendum on independence. Did you know that? That is the most effective piece of leverage that Alberta and Albertans have to negotiate a better deal. Well, we can talk about that later. The Q&A period shortly. Anyway, the buckets are done, so I guess I'm done too. Thank you very much for listening to me for that long. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back for the Q&A, which is my favorite part of the evening. If you're pissed off at the things I'm saying, please stay and tell me why. Give it to me. I want to hear it. Back in 10 minutes. Oh, and there's some cool Alberta stuff and even some Canada stuff back there if you're interested. Please go visit Jasper, and he'll tell you why it's important to buy it. And the Let's Talk Alberta stuff too. Yes, please. Sorry, I'm a capitalist.
All right. Well, thank you very much for tuning in.
Okay, we're going to get going here. While we wait for the other speakers to get up here, I've got a couple of things. First is I've got two favors to ask of you. The first favor is the algorithms really play havoc with our posters and the link. So if I could get you to do me a favor and go to freedomcalendar.net or letstalkalberta.com, pull the posters for upcoming events, and send them to people that you may know in the areas that they're going to be, and ask them to send them out to their friends. It's what I call the shampoo method. If anybody remembers the Clairol commercials from the 70s and 80s, you tell two friends and they'll tell two friends, and so on and so on. And as you can tell, I know lots about shampoo. The other favor is if you know anybody or you live on a major highway and would be willing to put up an 8-foot by 16-foot banner, talk to me. I've got another 15 coming. They should be here later on this week or early next week, and we'll get it to you so you can put it up along the major highways.
Shane, where's Max? Can I have a mic too, Max? Is that allowed? Am I allowed to have a mic? There's only one mic? There are two mics? Good. I found out there's another benefit of having one of those big banners. I didn't even realize.
What's that?
If you're like me and you kind of like your peace and quiet, you don't want people coming over and visiting all the time, put up a banner with my face on it, and then you get some serenity. It's great.
And if you wanted to even have more, put up one of them that has my face on it. And then they'll run away in a hurry. Now, coming up, there is a meeting in Thorhild on August 11th. 6:30 p.m. the doors open. 7 p.m. the presentation starts. It's on Bill C9 and what it means for Canadians. And there'll be Jason Levine will be a guest speaker, as will Ron Robertson, retired from the Edmonton Police Services. So if you want to go learn a little bit more about Bill C9, August 11th, 7 p.m. in Thorhild. Now we'll get started with the questions. And do you want me to tell all the questions? Okay, so how we're going to do this is you put up your hand, and Jasper, who has got the mic right there, he'll come around to you, and he will hold the mic so that we don't get somebody pontificating. Try and keep it to a short question so we can go through all of them. If you got more than one question, we'll come back to you.
I will decide to Cheng.
Okay, you decide.
If we don't get to your question, Max, I'm real loud there. Turn me down a bit. If we don't get to your question, we stick around for a bit so you can come talk to us individually as well.
You know, we didn't ask how many people are here at this presentation for the first time hearing a presentation like this.
Wow.
That is incredible. Thank you very much.
Okay, so my name is Sharon Zigman. I'm from Boyle area, and my question is, if on October 19th the referendum goes in our favor, what happens next? Another referendum? Like, how long does this go on till we win?
Well, first of all, I'm going to start with my personal view on this. No matter what happens in October, things are going the way they're supposed to be. I try to remind people that no matter what the outcome is, and this is part of the faith thing, like you notice we open in prayer, we honestly believe that regardless of what the outcome is in October, it's meant to be that way, and it's God's will. So I will say for the record that we already won, and we won about 2,000 years ago on the cross. Now, if you're talking about the outcome specifically of the referendum, and I'm assuming that you mean a yes vote. So assuming there is a yes vote on October 19th of this year, the question that you're answering yes to is something along the lines of, do you agree that the government of Alberta should begin the legal process according to the Constitution to hold a binding referendum on independence? I believe the question is something like that. So it's saying, do you agree that we should start talking seriously and doing the work to have a proper referendum on independence? So the next day, nothing happens. Maybe there's some people having a celebration party. Well, there's going to be one way or another. And then the next however long, we're going to be continuing to have the conversations. That's why we decided to do a town hall type thing rather than advocate for the specific outcome, is because the conversation is just going to continue. If you want my personal tinfoil hat opinion, I think we're going to see some funny business happen after. If it's a yes, I think you're going to hear a lot of, and you'll know this, I'm sure you've heard this, you need to set your desire and your will aside for now, Albertans. We've heard that for 120 years. And you need to help us beat the NDP. That's the only thing that we're going to worry about. We have an election coming up. You need to give us money, come to our things. The only thing that matters is that we beat the NDP, because if they win, you'll never get a chance. If someone else wins, you might not get the bread box that is making you be able to survive right now. So I think the government's going to try and kick the can down the road, because politicians, if they could do nothing, they would be just in bliss. So it just means that we have to continue working towards whatever solution we want, and that involves participating in politics at every level, attending AGMs, supporting the candidates and political parties that are aligned with your values, being vocal, having the conversations, being willing to, kind of take one on the chin when somebody disagrees with what you're saying. We have to be bolder in our opinions. For far too long, we have failed to have the conversations that are important to us as Albertans, and now is the time to not do that.
Hi, my name's Don Cavill. I've been in this community for quite a while now and been in the province for 85 years. I didn't realize I was so badly victimized. I've always thought that I'm luckier than all my parents and grandparents because I've had the best of lives here. I've traveled extensively, but my tax base has always been in Alberta. So I've traveled up and down the Mackenzie and stuff. And one of the things you haven't touched on today is I wrote an article in the newspaper about 5 years ago, and I outlined all the things that the federal government has poured money into Alberta that is vastly greater than any of the other Western provinces. For example, the whole oil thing down the Mackenzie, Eldorado Nuclear and all of this stuff. We're ignoring that tonight. What I'd like to do is first thank you for having this, and I wish it was more extensive so we had a better mix here. But what my question is, you've outlined all of the things that we should worry about. You've outlined how it could be made better. But what we need to know before October 19th is we need to know exactly what form of government we're going to have, who's going to set it up, who's going to do the regulations and stuff like this, and what role will the heads of the separatist movement have in the new government?
Those are awesome questions, and I want to start off, again, for the record, you're not a victim. We're not victims. We're citizens who can change things if we want. That's not a victim, that's a participant. We just need to start being participants. I believe that being a Canadian and being free to express my political opinions, even if those opinions are so controversial as to advocate for a specific province to be its own nation, that's a blessing to me, and I am absolutely honored to have that opportunity. So I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression that I hate Canada. I don't. It's a blessing to be here. It's a blessing to be able to have these conversations, and I believe we have a moral obligation to have them. So what you said is, you know, that is a really, really good point. And that actually, I wrote a couple trifolds, and it's called Show Me the Other Half of the Ledger. Far too many times people are going to tell you something, but they fail to talk about the other part of it. So when we specifically talk about money stuff, it's on a net basis. So you mentioned that the federal government has invested money in Alberta in certain projects. That is 100% true. But what's important to know is where the federal government gets that money from. And that's why we look at the entire output and the entire input and not just one or the other, because everything the federal government gives back to Alberta is something that they collected from us. For instance, our health transfer. We get a health transfer from the federal government. I think it's $6 billion average or something like that per year, but it's not like the federal government is some, you know, benefactor that's giving us something out of the goodness of their heart. No, they're returning back to us what we have created in value, and they're giving it back to us for one of our services. So the Mackenzie pipeline expansion, the nuclear projects, the recent pipeline that was supposed to cost $6 billion and the federal government took over, it cost $36 billion. That was money that was a net outflow from Alberta in the first place. So a lot of these things, and this is important to remember as well, Alberta wouldn't just magically not have to pay for things that the federal government pays for right now either, right? Border security, passports, proper immigration offices. These are things that would be added to the cost of an independent nation of Alberta. But so when we talk about the money stuff, we always talk about the total collected by the federal government that goes to Ottawa minus what's provided back in cash and services. That's where we get that net output from. So I'm glad you brought that up, that the federal government does in fact invest money back to Alberta, but the net is still quite far in the negative. And that's going back all the way to 1965. And John, you had something.
I just have one observation. I think your questions are really, really valid, and I appreciate them a lot. But I have a question for you to think about. You don't have to answer this. What does the federal government have that generates money? Anybody know what the federal government has that generates money? Tax revenue. What does Alberta have that generates revenue? And forestry, and agriculture, and mining. All of the things that create the money that the federal government has invested in the rest of Canada, whether it's in Alberta or Saskatchewan or BC or the Maritimes, they don't create any money unless they print it. And when they print a dollar, what happens to the dollar you have in your pocket? It becomes worth less because there's more of them. So to sit here and say that, gee, the federal government has invested so much money in Alberta, we should be grateful. Remember where that money comes from. It comes from taxpayers. It comes from you. It comes from me. The federal government does not generate revenue.
Okay, on to your second part of your question, which is very valid. Talking about what's going to happen after the referendum if it's success. What are we going to do? What's the form of government? Those are all things that have to be decided by the people, not by an independence leader. No leader can, the leaders in the movement in the end are basically irrelevant. It's the people that will make those decisions. Take the United States for an example. They did the Declaration of Independence in 1776. They didn't get a constitution until 1797. It's things that take years to do, but it needs to be done by the people, for the people. So we need to have constitutional conventions. We need to have referendums on what form of government we want. Personally, I do not want anything to do with the Westminster system. It's rigged against people, but that's just my opinion. It needs to be the will of the people. If we don't do the will of the people, then we'll end up with something that is what we're trying to rid ourselves of. So it's very important that it be the will of the people.
Just to go a little further, if you want my personal opinion on what I like to see, I'll share that with you. Would you like to know? Okay, so my personal opinion on what I would like to see a nation of Alberta adopt as a form of government, I would like Alberta to be a constitutional republic. Why is that? I would like Alberta to be a nation that believes in the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Not to say that everybody has to believe the same things as one another, but to say that there is something greater than us that we strive to that exists apart from our failings. The other part of it is I want the new nation of Alberta to think differently about people. Right now, it doesn't seem to me as though our systems are geared towards prosperity for the people and human flourishing. And a lot of this comes evident in some of the legislation that we see. Canada's motto is peace, order, and good governance, right? It's a very British thing. Be polite, don't make any waves, and just, we'll govern yourselves and be done with it. The United States is a different example. Not to say it's perfect, but their motto is life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And I believe that a nation should be to the benefit of the people. It should be about the people prospering, period. And that's why I want to flip the script, and I want the people to hold the power, and I want the people to tell the government how they may act instead of government telling people how they may act. And this is just one of many ideas out there. There's other people advocating for other things. But what I can tell you is, and again, back to the conversation, why it's so important, we have thousands of years of history to look to. We have the benefit of living right next door to the greatest experiment in freedom the world's ever seen, the United States. They celebrated their 250th year this year. Not to say they're perfect, but they've existed for 250 years and maintained their freedom. That's something important that we can look at. My friend Jasper from Holland, the Dutch Constitution, the United States actually based parts of theirs on that. So we have the benefit of hindsight. We can look and say, okay, what worked for the people, what didn't work, and then we can put our minds together and we can decide what the foundation is that's going to give our children the best shot at a free and prosperous future where the sanctity of their life and the happiness of them and their family is put over the achievements of government. So that's my personal advocacy for government.
I'd like to make a comment on that. I agree wholeheartedly with what Chris just said, but does anybody here who know who Raquel Garbers is? Anybody? Okay, well, Raquel Garbers was Canada's former senior defense policy architect. She has, I think, about a 30-year history in defense analysis that is worldwide in its influence. She's a very, very well-regarded and respected person who has a wealth of knowledge about the way defense needs to work in the world, not just in Canada, but in the world. And in October of 2025, she published an op-ed in the Hill Times warning that the anti-American rhetoric that we have was effectively splitting the Western alliance to the benefit of our adversaries. I won't say our enemies, because they're not enemies yet. They're our adversaries. And she was very, very concerned about that. And shortly after she wrote that op-ed, the Canadian government publicly signaled a shift towards declaring Beijing a strategic partner. Now, when we talk about, like Chris says, government for the people, by the people, at our direction, the last thing we want is a strategic alliance with a country that doesn't believe that the people are the sovereign in the country and the government serves the people. So what did they do with Raquel Garbers? Anybody know? They fired her. She's right now engaged in a lawsuit against the Canadian government, trying to identify who actually signed the form that said you're fired and what were the rationale and reasoning behind it. Because they have effectively destroyed a woman who has an international reputation in her field. We don't want that. We want what Chris has just talked about. We want a government where the people are in charge, the government is the servant of the people, and we have free choice to petition our government, to actively oppose our government, and to do the things that we need to do as a free people. Just thought I'd bring that one up for you.
Just a quick one, Shane. In your history, you forgot about the fact that in the 30s, Alberta was the only province that defaulted on the federal payments.
I just want to point something out. Yeah, you're right. That's correct. The 30s hit Alberta particularly hard because we were massively leveraged on ag, like almost only ag and forestry, and the 30s was rough. I actually want to give a shout out to Quebec here, because Quebec, there's kind of a tale, I don't know how true it is, but Quebecers talk about what they refer to as an Alberta tax. Back when things were really tough for Alberta, Quebec actually collected some taxes and helped Alberta out. And this comes from my friend Benoit Trudeau. I haven't really dug into it, but I will acknowledge and recognize that that there was a time when Alberta benefited or was supported by other provinces. I'm not arguing that fact at all. What I would like to point out is that an independent Alberta, we would have the choice on how we were going to use whatever surpluses we have. And there's no reason why Alberta couldn't help neighbors when neighbors needed it. Like, if I was the whatever leader of Alberta and Ontario was on fire, I would have no problem sending help, sending water bombers, right? These are the things that neighbors do, and I don't think those things would stop just because of border changes. But Shane, you had something else?
Oh, just to expand on that, you're right with Quebec helping in the 1930s. But the biggest thing that happened in the 1930s was the Canada Wheat Board, by far. When they came in and they started seizing Alberta farmers and Saskatchewan and Manitoba farmers, Western farmers' grain, to send it to the east to supply them with food. Anything that they sent us to help us financially was more than dissipated by the fact that they were starving out Alberta farmers. And there were farmers that were very close to starvation because of their policy of seizing Alberta grain and shipping it east. So yes, they sent money, but money didn't help when the farmers had nothing to eat.
You have to remember Shane's talk about Alberta farmers' grain being seized by the wheat board or by the federal government during those times, and Alberta farmers getting billed for the transport but not paid for it. That probably contributed greatly to the fact that they defaulted.
So we love hearing hard questions, and thanks for making them sweat, because I love to see them working their ass off. Sir, go ahead.
Mike Schmid from Athabasca here. This is my 5th meeting, and thanks to the previous guy that asked the question. I'd like to bring somebody new to these meetings just to, grow it out and get a good, I believe in what you guys are doing. And when you bring that up to people, they downright don't want to even talk about it. So, I'm glad you came. I wish more people would have came. I tried to bring people like that. but it's just like, it's more of a statement, I guess, or a question, or what do you do with something like that when they downright don't even refuse to talk about it? So.
Were you born kind of in the late 80s, mid 70s, late 70s? 86. Oh, you're younger than me.
68.
Okay, so you watched it. So you watch Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh yeah,
Didn't we
yeah.
all?
Well, we didn't have much here, one channel, so.
You remember in the cartoons when Bugs Bunny or Elmer wanted to take someone somewhere, he just walked up behind him with a potato sack and just put it on him and put him over his shoulder?
Meep, meep.
Don't do that. That's a good question, and it's just a reality. As a Canadian, we're taught two things, or we're told to do two things. Don't talk about religion and don't talk about politics because it's rude. And this has been kind of hammered into us for years. And it's put us in a position where we think it's inappropriate to talk about the two most important things in our lives. So politics. Politics affects every part of your life, whether you want it to or not, from before you're born to after you're dead. You live your whole life in the political machine. Religion affects your entire life and your entire eternity. And we're not supposed to talk to each other about these things and share the truths that we learned. This is a sad state of society. I believe it stems from Canada not having to take what we have. Like the United States, I use it as an example because they're so close and the history's there. For them to get their freedom and their independence, they had to fight for it and bleed for it, and it was tough, and it was grueling, and it was gross, and men and women had to watch their sons and daughters, well, sons back then, go out the door and never come back. So when they got these things, it means more to them. So politics in the United States, like I think 70 or 80% of people in the United States have membership in a political party, and in Canada, it might be higher than that. In Canada, it's like 3%. So that is something we have to deal with. And I would say, above all, maintain the relationship with the person that's refusing to listen to anything. Because the reality is, we have a good crowd here tonight, but we're not reaching even a fraction of Athabasca right now. So it's you folks who are going to go out and you're going to have the conversations later. Whether it's, hey, these guys are nuts and don't ever listen to them, or, hey, these guys had some good points, we should talk about this. It's you folks that are going to reach the people we don't. So if you maintain those relationships, then the greatest conversation starters in this topic that have ever walked the earth, who are our politicians, they're going to do something dumb in the future, and someone's going to say something, and then maybe it's time to talk about this subject. But maintain the relationships, and if someone's having that emotional response that we see very frequently to the conversation about Alberta's future, just stop talking about it. The relationship's more important, and the conversation can continue later on.
I'm going to add something to that, but it's nothing to do with the politics side. From your age, and if you grew up in this area, you had Saturday morning cartoons, Popcorn Playhouse.
Wasn't that on during the noon hour?
It was on in the noon, night, and Saturday morning.
Meep, meep.
Well, just as an aside, I have kids that are older than you.
It's my turn. Dennis Irving, I'm from Baptiste Lake area, and I don't have a question. I have a feeling that what you guys are doing, your movement and everything else, is going to wake up the politicians in Ottawa and Alberta, and I think we'll get some action. I really do.
I think you're absolutely right. And there have surveys been done of the conservative population of Alberta. That's people who vote and belong to both the federal and provincial conservative parties. And those polls have indicated that over 66% of Alberta conservatives agree with the positions that we're stating here. Now, that doesn't mean that 66% of the population of Alberta agrees. It just means that the conservative members of the province, or the conservative-leaning people of the province, agree with what we're saying. And what that's done is it's created a very difficult situation for the UCP and for Danielle Smith, because she knows that the majority of her base support independence or something akin to it. She knows that. which puts her in a very difficult position. So I think she's playing both sides of the board right now. And I also think, and this is just my opinion, and opinions are like elbows, usually people have a couple of them. I actually think that Danielle Smith has eyes on the leadership of the federal Conservative Party. That's my opinion. And I'm not against Danielle Smith. Good for her. If she's that ambitious and that's what she wants to do, then go for it. But don't poison Alberta in pursuit of it.
I'm going to be a little bit more black-pilled than that. I wish I agreed with you that the politicians are going to wake up and pay attention. What I am actually seeing is the exact opposite. They're doubling down more on federal control, and it's actually very disconcerting when you see that the people that are supposed to be representing the province of Alberta, the people of Alberta, kissing butt to Ottawa and giving them MOUs that are selling out Alberta's future, in my opinion. It is very blackpilling to see that. That's just my take on it from the politician side.
I can only reiterate what I said during my brief talk earlier on. We need to make sure that the people we put into office in Edmonton are 100% Alberta and Albertans focused. They have to be. So that's up to you. When it's time for you to pick your MLA, make sure you pick one that is 100% Alberta focused. And when you pick your federal representative, ask for the same thing. They're supposed to represent Alberta's interest in the federal parliament. Well, make sure that they do that and they don't sit there and say yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full.
My name is Brad Drew. I'm from Athabasca here. I agree with a lot of what you're saying tonight, but a question is for Shane. Can you talk briefly about the formation and the history of the ATB and how Alberta is the only province with its own bank?
It's not the only province, number one. Quebec also has Desjardins. I can't even say it. My tongue doesn't work. Desjardins. Which is actually a far superior, for the people of Quebec, it's a far superior credit union than ATB. But ATB was formed to be the people's bank for Albertans, to represent the people of Alberta. It has got a arm's length relationship with the provincial government now. It used to be very tied in. I mean, you take a look at Peter Pocklington and all that stuff that went down. But at the end of everything that happened with Peter Puck, they took and they gave them their leash and separated it so that they were farther from the government. But when they did that, the biggest goal the ATB is trying to do is to go from being a credit union to being a bank. And like during the convoy time, they were right in their seasoned bank accounts the same as anybody else. They were one of the first in Alberta, correct, to do it. Whereas a credit union is governed by the province. A bank is governed by the federal government. They do not have any obligation to do anything the federal government says when it comes to them. So the Treasury branch was started as a great credit union for the people, but it has turned into a horrible, horrible financial institution for the people of Alberta.
I'd like to make a comment. I want to compare Alberta and Quebec. Desjardins, almost 100% of the people of Quebec have an account at the Desjardins Credit Union. Almost all of them have. And that credit union owns more property in Alberta than the Alberta government does. And while we're talking about that, let's talk about the Quebec pension plan. What is it, five times or 3 to 5 times the value per individual Quebec member of the QPP? The value of their pension is, I think, 3 times greater than the value of the CPP is for us. They've done a marvelous job financially, at our expense in some ways, but we could do a whole lot worse than emulating what Quebec has done as far as asserting their sovereignty within Canada.
I was just going to say, do you know how much the Quebec pension plan owns in this province? Cross Iron Mills. owned by the Quebec Pension Plan. The outlet mall at the Edmonton Airport, owned by the Quebec Pension Plan. They own more land than the provincial government in this province. And who doesn't blame them? It's a great place to invest. But why aren't we doing something similar? One thing that Ben Trudeau always talks about is our revenue payments. Every Friday, the oil companies deposit into the CIBC in Toronto all of the revenue payments. And over the weekend, while it's being posted, the CIBC makes, what is it, 6 million, something like that? I thought it said 2 or 3 or something. Anyways, it's several. How much, Brad? $2 to $3 million in interest payments that stays in Ontario. Why aren't they taking and putting those revenue payments into Alberta banks? I mean, there's no reason for it. And it doesn't have to go through the legislature. They just have to say, we're changing bank accounts that we're putting it into. Put it into this bank account, and that money would stay in the province.
Do you know why Quebec does what they're doing? Why they pursue sovereignty the way they are? What makes Quebec different? Quebec has struggled.
Identity.
It's the culture. So in the 1600s, in Quebec, it wasn't easy for French-speaking Canadians. It was absolutely awful. They lived under some incredibly oppressive conditions, and that carried through right until 1960, I guess, something like that. French-speaking Canadians couldn't get loans. They had jobs that had hugely disproportionate safety issues. It was bad. That booklet that some of you took, I wrote it. It's called Why Every Argument to Stay is a Reason to Leave. There's a whole section on there on Quebec, and I didn't know these things. But the short version of the story is Quebec culture was built on the struggle and sacrifice of French Canadians that they remember to this day. So when you talk about sovereignty with Quebecers, they had to take their sovereignty to pull themselves out of that. They had a reason to do it. With Alberta, we're looking at some, annoying taxation, annoying underrepresentation, certainly nothing like what the French Canadians had to deal with back then. For us, it's more of an opportunity of how much better things could be if we managed our own wealth and affairs and made the decisions here at home. But I would encourage you, if you have one of those, I didn't bring enough apparently, please share it with someone else when you're done with it and really read up on what Quebec went through. It's quite the interesting thing. And I never learned this in school. I didn't learn this until I met Ben Trudeau.
And that's where I would recommend, this is going to be a direct plug for Ben's book. There you can get it from Bahra at the back. That book lays it out exactly what, doesn't matter whether you want sovereignty within the United Canada, as Ben is, he's a sovereignist, but we agree on 98%, it's what has to be done. It's the remaining 2% that we disagree on. But every step that he talks about in that book, we need to do. If we want control over our lives, we have to do that. And Ben has been an advisor to Stephen Harper, or an advisor to Jason Kenney and Danielle Smith. He's been around politics both in Quebec and then here for the last 22 years. So I would recommend everybody read that book. It's full of information.
I would second that. Read his book. My wife she has his book. Then he's made 3 smaller books about particular things that my wife is devouring, and I have to listen for hours to her tell me why I need to say this and say that and say the other when I come to things like this. But I'd like to point out that there's some differences. Like Quebec is a unique culture. They have their own culture. They are, in fact, a distinct society because they're distinctly different from other parts of Canada. So does Newfoundland. Has anybody here ever been to Newfoundland? Tell me, they're a distinct society, aren't they? Well, so are we. Now, there's a significant difference between the people of Quebec and the people of Alberta. And I'll express that this way. Quebec's government has done what it's done for its people, and the people have come to expect the government to continue to do it. The government does for the people expect the government to do it. We are different. Our culture is different, our origins are different. What we say to government is, don't do this for us. We don't actually tell them that. We don't expect them to do this for us. We expect them to get the hell out of the way and let us do what we do. We want to develop our own resources, our own agriculture, our own mines and minerals, our own petroleum, and we want the opportunity to sell it, and we want them to stay out of our way while we make ourselves wealthy, or at least comfortable. Quebec is different. I don't want to be like Quebec. What I want to be is I want to exert the same control over our sovereignty that Quebec does, so that we have free agency, free choice, and the ability to influence what happens to our children, our grandchildren, and in my case, our great-grandchildren. That's what I want.
So I've got a question written down from somebody in the audience, and it's one of my favorites. Most asked question. Guess what the question is? No. It's a mag. Use a mag. No, it's if we separate, what will happen to our CCP, ASB, and pensions?
So the question is about pensions or things that you're currently receiving from government that you're concerned about. Pensions, OAS, those types of things. So first of all, in October, nothing will happen. If Alberta chooses to continue the conversation and begin the process, and we have another referendum, and that referendum's a yes, the next day, nothing happens. There's a period of negotiation that happens after this, and this is written in the Clarity Act, which is Canada's preference, the way this would go. Your pension, though, specifically, that's yours. You earned it, you contributed to it, you were actually compelled by law to contribute to it. That's how good of an investment is. They had to make a law for you to invest in it. And you'll get it. If you move to France, you continue to get your pension. If you move to Holland, you continue to get your pension, right? Here's a question about your current pension. If you pass away, what happens to your pension? Are you happy about that? That's not the government's money. That's your money that they collected from you and invested in that pension plan. And when you and your employer, yes, we match it dollar for dollar. So if your pension is something that you would have had and you pass away and that can't go to your kids, I'm sorry, they get a little bit. Are you happy with that? You shouldn't be. Now, that's not to say that the people that are receiving pensions shouldn't be assured that their pension will continue. So I can tell you by letter of the law with the Canada Pension Plan Act, your pension continues regardless of which nation you live in. However, it would be dishonest of me if I didn't acknowledge that the federal government may try and do something to say, well, we're going to cancel that or something. Personally, I can't see that it's going to happen, but it has to be brought up. My advocacy, and I will fight tooth and nail for this, if anybody's receiving any kind of entitlement from the federal government currently, and Alberta decides to pursue self-determination, Alberta sovereignty, independence, I would be fighting tooth and nail to say that I don't give a crap, Alberta, how much it costs or what you have to do. You're not leaving anyone behind, and you cut those checks and you make sure those people get those things that they depend on, because self-determination isn't about leaving people behind. It's about creating a better future. So we can't exactly say, well, we're just going to ignore all of the people that need that stuff to survive. I also want to point out that there are people that are trying to tell you, politicians, trying to gaslight you, to tell you if you choose something different, you'll lose your pension and you will lose your citizenship. Neither of those statements are backed up by any facts, any laws, anything. On the contrary, neither of those things can be taken from you. They just can't. So another question that we should be asking the people that are having these conversations with us is, if you're telling us these things and they're specifically not true, and you're trying to make us fearful of having the conversation in the first place, why are you doing that? That's not appropriate, and it's important to cut through that garbage when we're dealing with these.
Governments historically use fear to control. I'm old enough to remember hiding under school desks because the nasty Russians were going to drop atomic bombs on us. And that didn't pan out very well. There wasn't any atomic bombs, but we had acid rain. And then after we had acid rain, we had, wait a minute, there's another ice age coming. Then we had global warming, which didn't pan out too well, so that transitioned into I forgot Y2K, yeah. Everything was going to collapse in the year 2000. I had a band at that time. I played music at the Fort Edmonton Park for a bunch of people we played music for years. And nothing happened. Our instruments kept working after midnight. In any event, then it was, global warming didn't pan out, so it became climate change. Now everything is climate change. You know that 0.04% of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide, and 0.0002% of that 0.04% is man-made. How that impacts climate is really beyond me, but then I'm only involved in engineering. I don't understand that complicated stuff. So the fact of the matter is the governments always use fear. That's what they do. They make you afraid. They want you to maintain the status quo. CPP, we are legally obligated. If Alberta became independent tomorrow, we are legally obligated to create a pension plan that is at least equal to the CPP. And I would be extremely disappointed if it wasn't better, because we contribute $3 billion a year more to that plan than we collect. As far as OAS is concerned, that's an entitlement, again, that we have. And that entitlement exists in law. The only thing that doesn't exist in law with the OAS is the supplement. The supplement is designed, the supplement is designed to accommodate the cost of living in Canada. In some instances, you would lose that if you lived in a different country. And that would be a country is more prosperous than Canada. And the main, right now what's happening when we talk about a country more prosperous than Canada, that's every other country in the group of seven, and every other country in the OECD is doing better than Canada. So, why are we last when we should be first?
To touch a little bit more on your citizenship, the Supreme Court has already determined that you cannot lose your citizenship. Omar Khadr proved that. If anybody doesn't remember who Omar Khadr is, that was the case that went to the Supreme Court because he went over and fought with ISIS, and the Canadian government stripped him of his Canadian citizenship. He took them to court. It went before the Supreme Court of Canada. They ruled on it. He got $10 million, and the Supreme Court ruled that there is only one way to lose your citizenship. And that is if you lied on your application to become a citizen. So if you're a natural-born citizen, there is nothing you can do short of giving it up that will take your Canadian citizenship.
This is a great example of how the courts were given the opportunity to make law. So before that ruling, and the legal mechanism that the government used to strip Omar Khadr of his citizenship was called the 1947 Act, 1940-something Act. And that said, if you fight against Canada or our allies with our enemies, you can lose your citizenship. That was it. Well, the Supreme Court ruled that no, you can't. Now, the piece of legislation that was passed in our House of Parliament, that was debated in our House of Parliament, supposedly our voices saying, hey, we want this law, was overturned by unelected judges that were appointed by the PMO's office. So that's an interesting point there.
Are we ready? Yes. You hold this because it's going to be a while. This is for Chris and the rest of the people up there. Can I address you by your first name, Chris? Please?
Yeah, sure, yeah. If I'm in trouble, you can call me Christopher James.
My name is Ben Matajon. There's some people here who know me, and there's probably a lot that don't. My family has been in the Athabasca community for 110 years on the same quarter of land. Through my family, I have to say that I probably understand this province better than any one of you three. And I would dare you to challenge me on that. I have read, Chris, I have read your booklet, Let's Talk, front to back, many times. And I'm here to challenge you and everything that you and your people are promoting.
On everything?
Everything.
It is a long question.
Even your last page of your booklet, which contains all the articles, the various budgets, polling, statistics, etc. That's fine. But what you've done is, from your run-in that you had with the federal government at your burger bar over COVID, you sat down and you wrote a manifesto about how to fix this problem, and you came up with the idea the best way to fix it is to leave it. I disagree.
Well, that's not accurate, but continue.
It is accurate. I will cite your booklet here. I have several readings from it. And in my opinion, all of this is not necessary. This is wishful thinking on your part, and you've contrived to bring people into the fold, obviously well-funded, and people have donated. I don't get donations. I pay tax in this county, and I have, and my family has, for 110 years.
As do I, thank you.
I'm an Albertan and I'm a Canadian, as are you. And I suppose you know where the name Alberta came from.
Queen
Yes, the
Victoria's-
wife of the...
Queen Victoria's daughter.
Yes, and who was her niece? Louise, Lake Louise. Thank you. I'm also a historian. So basically what I'm saying here is that, are you aware of the escalator clause? Are you aware of the escalator clause?
In which capacity? Like in which escalator
As
clause?
far as the equalization formula.
Okay, yeah, fill us in.
Okay. Do you know who brought that into play?
Stephen Harper.
No, you're wrong. This is a gentleman from Alberta who happened to be the deputy minister of finance under the Ed Stelmach government. And his name was Al O'Brien. And he proposed this escalator to allow Alberta to pay tax on our royalties, which we did not ever do before the year 2007. That's a fact. Check it out. So, you have come up with all kinds of whining and crying about Alberta.
Don't call me a whiner and crier. That's not polite. I don't do that to you.
Alberta, can you disagree that Alberta is the highest median average income in Canada? $76,500. That's a fact. Check it out.
What's your point?
Let me finish, please. Alberta has the highest purchasing power of any individual province in Alberta. Alberta has the second highest standard of living of any province in Alberta. Certainly if you've been to Nova Scotia or Newfoundland or Labrador or Baffin Island, you couldn't disagree. I have been to all of them. I was born in the Northwest Territories, by the way. So my point is this. You do not provide us a legitimate reason to be angry with Ottawa. I don't see any solutions in your argument. If you are a true Albertan and you believe in the people of Alberta, then we stay and we fight. And we fight for exact same reasons that you have made the argument. And your arguments are basically saying, yeah, we need to fight and stay in Canada, and we should be treated fairly.
I'll have them ask the question now because
It's a lot to remember, but I'm gonna start with your first statement about my run-in with the federal government. I never had a run-in with the federal government, not once. My issue was with the provincial government. This has nothing to do with that. That's another fight. I stood up against what the government did, and I believed it was wrong. That motivated me to start learning some things. And in that journey, I learned some things that have brought me to the conclusions that I have today. So a lot of the things you mentioned, like the escalator clause being a Ed Stelmach thing, sure it is. And Harper's government reviewed that and they made some changes as well. I'm not arguing that fact. At no time during those things did Alberta have opportunity to stop that. That's what I'm getting at. Now, me saying that I believe that if I'm taxed, doesn't matter if I make the most money. Alberta has a very high average wage, yes, because we work hard, we work more, we have a younger workforce, we have a resource-based economy, and we have a lot of oil. So yes, we're going to make more. Whether we make more or less doesn't change the fact that the government shouldn't be taking money from our pockets and not giving it back to us in services. It's irrelevant how much we make. If somebody works hard and they make more money, more power to them. I hope that you make all the money in the world. Now, with your saying that I don't, that you understand Alberta more than I do, maybe you understand Alberta 15 years ago better than I do. Because when you start talking about quality of life, I think about my kids. So my kids are in their early 20s now. And when I was in my early 20s, I was coming to Alberta because of opportunity. I wanted to be the highest median wage earner in Canada, so I came to Alberta. And I started working and I prospered. And I was able to do things. I could buy a car, I could pay my insurance, I could get a house, I could do all these things and spend money on stupid, ridiculous things that if I hadn't, I wouldn't be here because I'd be retired probably a long time ago living in a tropical place. But now my kids, the quality of living that you're talking about may exist in people my age or older because of the things we've done in the past. My son pays $5,000 a year for car insurance. My children have to live with 3 or 4 or 5 other people to be able to afford a house. Our groceries cost almost exactly double today that they did 15 years ago. And these are things that face all Albertans. So while you're correct, and your perspective on this is different than mine, I'm assuming you're a couple years older than me, so you experienced a different time than I did. My time in Alberta is from 2000 to now. 26 years I've been in Alberta. And what I've seen, the things that I've seen change, they don't support what you just said. I agree with you that Alberta is a wonderful place. I agree with you, and actually I believed the same fairy tale that we could fix the things that you did until I started learning about this. This wasn't, this journey for me is not a way to fix my problems that I had during COVID. This is something much, much greater than that. This is a realization that a lot of the problems that we face as Albertans and even as Canadians, they are from a structural deficiency where it's not designed for the people. It's designed so that the people are governed and are peaceful and orderly. That's my concern. It's not, we didn't fill rooms like this because we pay too much taxes, although we did have a referendum on equalization and 62.5% said that we wanted to end it. What did that do? Nothing. You said that we can fix things. I would argue that we've tried to fix things in Canada, specifically in the West, for 120 years. There's been a number of things we've done, and you're old enough to remember. You remember in the 1980s when there was an independence movement in Alberta. You probably remember when Elmer Knutson and Christie were traveling around advocating for either a confederation of Western provinces or Alberta to be independent. You remember the National Energy Program. You remember how Alberta has been along for the ride in these things. You must remember watching Preston Manning build the Reform Party in an amazing way, coming from nothing, with the slogan, "The West wants in." We want to fix these things. And that's where I started too. My hand always went up when Dr. Modry said, who here in this room wants to use a referendum as leverage to fix the things within Confederation so we could stay in Canada? I put my hand up because I want to fix things. Then I start learning about how we tried to do these things before. Well, the Reform Party is the greatest example of that. The biggest Western political movement the country's ever seen, advocating not for leaving, not for abandoning ship, but for fixing things. We want a seat at the table. What do we want? We want a Triple E Senate. What do we want? We want proper representation. What do we want? We want elected Supreme Court justices. The Confederation shot every single one of those down, and the Supreme Court actually ruled that we will never have an elected Senate. Never. So when Alberta tried to fix things, that was the best example. When we tried to fix things, The federal government just said no. They said, no, we're not going to do it. Then we have Stephen Harper. He's elected as prime minister after penning the firewall letter with Ted Morton and a few others. And the firewall letter has some things in there that would fix the problems, a lot of the problems. Collect our own pension, collect our own taxes, have our own employment insurance, control our immigration, have our police force. 5 things that Alberta could do within the Constitution without changing anything that would significantly improve our position within Confederation. Stephen Harper was elected as prime minister. Not one of those things was done. Now, why do you think that if a Western Albertan prime minister was elected and then became, a Western MP was elected, then became prime minister, that we wouldn't fix these things that make Alberta have an issue being in Confederation? It's because we can't. Stephen Harper didn't do those things because he knows that this country isn't designed to advocate for the West. Clifford Sifton said it hasn't changed since. Pierre Poilievre came to Alberta, and he told Albertans, he looked them dead in the eye, and he said, you would be better off in the CPP. I know that's a lie. I know that if Alberta took control of our pensions, we could increase your pension payments. I know we can. It's math and it's easy. And a federal politician that wants to be our prime minister said no. Why is that? Because you cannot advocate to fix the things that are wrong with Confederation and be government in Canada. The two things have never existed side by side in the same office. They cannot, because it was never designed to. So I 100% agree with you that I would prefer if we could fix all of these things that are either annoying or existential threats to Albertans. I want that. Where we differ is how we get it. I don't believe that if we do the same thing over and over again that we're going to get a different result. I really don't. I believe we need to do something different. So for you, sir, I would say you may be somebody that would support a change in Alberta's position with the Confederation. I might have a different opinion on how to get there. I say we take control of everything we can and we get the leverage, so when we're negotiating these things we can. Because there's 2 times in Canadian history we've tried to change things, Meech Lake, Charlottetown, and they both failed. Why? Because there was never any leverage. There was never leverage to get the things done. If Alberta answers yes to this question, that would open the door to the conversation. Under the Clarity Act, a yes vote in a binding referendum would lead to negotiations with the federal government and the other provinces. The following words are critical to remember. The following words are, which may lead to secession. So no matter if you believe in a sovereign independent nation of Alberta like me, or you believe that we need to fix the things here in Alberta and within Canada so that we can exist as a unified Canada. The path is likely the same. We need to negotiate those things from a position of strength that we've never been able to before, and that's what this is about. My issues with the government are completely beside the point. I'm over that. I'm suing them, but that's another story. What this is about is an opportunity for Alberta to be the first province in Canada to have the leverage to change these things, okay?
Your last statement actually proves that we're closer together than we are farther than apart. Because you said we need to just keep fighting. Well, you need to take a look and dive into the Constitution. Because in order for us to make a bunch of changes, there's a bunch that we can do without, but to make fundamental changes, it's almost impossible. Let's take equalization. Equalization is now embedded as of 1982. Before that, it wasn't, but as of 1982, it's embedded in our Constitution. So there's 7 provinces that benefit and 3 that are either net getting back. So out of that, if you have to have 7 out of 10 provinces with one of those provinces having to be Quebec or Ontario because it requires 50% plus 1 of the population. So you have to have 7 provinces plus, and one of them has to be either Quebec or Ontario. You're never going to get that passed in a constitutional conference. And so you want to make any changes, the requirements for doing that are impossible to meet, because not only do you have to do, let's say by chance you've got that 7 out of 10, and let's say it was Ontario that it came on board and we got that passed. Now we go to the House of Commons. We have to pass the House of Commons. Then we have to pass the Senate. Then we have to pass the Supreme Court. Then Quebec has a veto. It's impossible to make the changes within Confederation. It's impossible to make the changes within Confederation. Our only hope is through independence to make those changes that we need to make, because the Confederation, since the beginning, since the Alberta Act, has been stacked against us. And that is the only way. I don't consider it whining to look at the facts. And the facts show that it is not physically possible to make those changes within Confederation.
I'd like to have just a second here. I really appreciate your last comment, we need to fight. And I would suggest that maybe that's some novel thing that we haven't been doing before. We need to fight. I don't know how we're going to fight, hopefully not with bullets and bombs. But I want to read something for you. The only things I would like to call your attention to before you retire to deliberate are first that the House of Commons, Senate, and ministers of the Dominion, and who make laws for this land and govern it, are no representation whatever of the people of the Northwest. Second, whatever the people of the Northwest, that the Northwest Council generated by the federal government has the great defect of its parent. In other words, they're exactly the same. Third, the number of members elected for the council by the people make it only a sham representative legislature and no representative government at all. Any idea where that comes from? That's Louis Riel addressing the jury that's about to deliberate on his guilt on when he was charged with sedition and treason and then subsequently hung. That was in 1885. So tell me, was he fighting? Seems to me he did. He actually used bullets and bombs to fight. What changed? He got hung. I appreciate you say fight, fight, fight. My wife and I lived our retirement in a beautiful, very large house on the beach in Mexico for a decade and a half. Then along came COVID, and I had a bunch of kids who were employed in the oil patch. They lost their jobs. They were struggling. A couple of them lost their homes. So we packed up our beautiful home in Mexico and came back to help our kids. I don't benefit from anything that's going on here. We could have independence the day after tomorrow, and it wouldn't benefit me one little bit. I'm doing this because from 1885, one of my old ancestral family members suggested that the federal government and the government of the Northwest Territories didn't give two hoots. Yeah, we're related. Don't tell anybody. Didn't give two hoots about the people of the Northwest Territories, and nothing has changed. The people in Canada, the real Canada, that's Upper and Lower Canada, don't care about us. They don't care about the Maritimes. Nothing has changed. We've been fighting it for over 100 years. Nothing has changed. If you can tell me that your assertion that we need to fight, if you can tell me how you're going to do it, to any effect, I'll stand behind you 110%.
We might have to do that after, because we're after 9:30 already. But speaking of appreciation, I do appreciate that you read my stuff, and that means a lot to me, because I'm assuming that you read it coming into it with an opposing view, correct? And you read it?
A lot of it, very much of it I agree with.
Let's just let Jasper give the mic there to you. Yeah, the people at home can't hear.
Yeah, very much I agree with it. And what this gentleman just said, I'm totally in agreement with. Yes, we do have to fight, and yes, we can fix it. In 3 years, are you aware that the equalization payment is up for review? That whole agreement. In 2029, it's up for review. And you talk about leverage? Danielle Smith has done a good job of walking the tightrope to give us leverage. And we never used that leverage. The last person to use it was the best premier this province ever had. His name was Peter Lougheed. And he took it to Ottawa and he won. And he said, do you remember this phrase? Let the eastern bastards freeze in the dark? Do you remember that? The bumper stickers?
That was Ralph Klein.
Yeah. So the last premier we had understood the importance of the oil and gas industry and the revenue that it generates for Alberta. Yes, we can change it from within. Gentlemen, you can't row your boat if you don't have the oars in the water.
Well, that's what we're talking about, getting the oars in the water. I want to remind you of another slogan that you might remember. The federal minister of finance in the early 80s, he had a very famous slogan. And I believe that slogan was intentional. And that slogan was, screw the West, we'll take the rest. And once you start to uncover some of these things and you look at it in the perspective of how Canada was created, and the structure that it is, you really start to see the big picture. And you're talking about equalization, amending the formula. Yes, we can do that. Equalization is one very small piece of this whole conversation. Like I said before, we didn't fill rooms like this because we paid too much taxes or equalization. This is a different thing. This is a different conversation. How would you like to be able to have input on what the constitution of the nation and that your kids and your grandchildren live in? How would you like that? How would you like to be part of a constitutional convention where you flip the script and your children have their rights deferred to first? That's the opportunity. It's very little about money. I've made lots of money. I've lost lots of money, and it is what it is. But the opportunity for self-determination and the choice on whether or not we're going to do it ourselves, that's a totally different thing. And you get to all of those things you're talking about, we get to decide. And for the first time in Canadian history, we're not begging for the scraps of Confederation, arguing for the incremental gains that my friend Jason Kenney wants us to be happy with. We're deciding the rules, and we're setting the stage for what our kids' lives are going to be like. That's what we're really after. Now, how long do we have this room? Does anybody know?
11.
Oh, okay. Well, then let's keep going.
I'd like to make one observation, and that is you talk about the equalization formula coming up for review in 3 years. When Jason Kenney was debating with Keith Wilson, one of the questions that came during that debate was to Mr. Kenney, and the question was, we had a referendum in Alberta where 62.7% of the people voted to eliminate equalization. What did you do? Do you know what his answer was? I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister. And what was the result, was the next question. Well, he didn't respond. Well, what did you do when he didn't respond? Well, I wrote a letter to each of the premiers asking them for a constitutional conference. And what was the response? They all said no. When you talk about the equalization, the fact of equalization is in our Constitution. We can't get rid of equalization unless we change the Constitution. The formula is something else. That's something that the provinces and the federal government negotiate. Can you actually imagine the 7 provinces that collect equalization sitting down and negotiating a new deal where they get less? Can you imagine them doing that? So how are we going to change it? What leverage?
Well, one other thing that if you're going on quotes, let's take another quote from 1980. Pierre Elliott Trudeau on bringing in the National Energy Program, and then it got written into policy. We are bringing this in not for the oil. We are bringing it to make sure that Alberta does not become the economic engine of Canada. And he said that directly and then brought it into policy. And we have been fighting against that. It's not about higher taxes. It's about having control of our destiny. We don't have control, and we will never be given control by the East. They have, because of the way the Constitution is set up, we will never get it. One of the best things that would give us more control in Alberta is if Quebec did separate, because then that would actually equalize out what our role in the country was a little bit more. But at this point in time, we have no leverage.
So 2029, how long is Daniel Smith in office then, and when does he get a pension?
Elections 2027, and provincial MLAs don't get pensions, which is why they're always looking at the federal politics. I want to point something else out here. I've been a very strong supporter of Danielle Smith ever since she was campaigning as leader. And this is coming from a guy that literally hated her guts because of what she did before, and that impacted my job. When she crossed the floor and we ended up with an NDP government, that hurt me and my family. So I found myself at one point sitting beside her at a dinner table. This is maybe 6 months before she ran for leadership. And I realized who she was, and I was seething. Then I watched her campaign. I watched some of the things she did, standing up to Ottawa, advocating for Alberta. She gained my support. I've been very supportive. Today I'll tell you that I think she's doing a terrible job. I agree. A pathetic job. And the reason I say that is not to disparage her character. I think she's a wonderful person. But she campaigns on a sovereign Alberta, the United Canada. And nothing has been done to do that. And she could have done things. We could have our pension by now. She's starting with the police a little bit. She dips her toes in things and doesn't do it. But there's a lot of other things she could do that would fix a lot of these problems, and for whatever reason, she's not doing it. And I shouldn't say fix, I should say make better. One of the things that Alberta could do is a reverse fuel tax. Did you know that we could subsidize people buying fuel in Alberta? So instead of charging 14 cents a liter at the pump for road tax or whatever, we could have a reverse. We could give a 20-cent subsidy, and we could put that on our books as a liability, and we could have that included in our equalization calculation, and we could, but doing the same thing Quebec does, and we wouldn't be hemorrhaging $30 billion a year. We could do that. Why aren't we doing it? What is she doing instead, and what has every provincial politician done since 1905? Kissing the ring of the federal politicians for one reason or another. So,
I gotta agree with him, though. Peter Lougheed was the exception to that.
Okay, sure. Okay, yeah, the built a lake, so his property value went up on his house. Great.
No, that was Delnack.
Okay, whatever. My point is, I'm done looking for politicians to save us from what's happening.
We have to do it.
Because it goes the same, it's a broken record. It goes the same way every time. They make all these promises, we're going to do these things. Hey, Alberta, if I can't fix these things that you want fixed, then you are the answer, and independence is the answer, and you need to have get the referendum on the books. And then they don't do it. And so, you know, when I hear people say, oh, she's doing a good job, I got to ask them, is she? Because what is different in Alberta today, besides some interesting policy things, than it was 3 years ago? We haven't gotten any closer to sovereignty or prosperity than we were 3 years ago, and it appears as we aren't, because now she's agreeing to do carbon capture projects that Albertans have flatly spoken out against, specifically at the AGM, the pathways thing, increasing our industrial carbon tax by 600%. So we could have the conversation about applying for a couple pipelines. Like these are reasons why I'm completely jaded with politicians, and now I'm looking to you, sir, to be part of this instead of them. And I think until we get on that, until we get onto that, like realize it's our job, I don't think anything's going to change.
I think that would be the last question there then.
Well, if we got the place till 11, I mean, we can take more questions.
I think people are voting with their feet.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there anyone else that has any really pressing questions? Because it is getting kind of late. Oh, Jasper?
Hi, well, I was just going to mention, well, I was a petition signer, and there was one young gentleman, under 20. He said, we fix Alberta, we fix all of Canada, because they can learn from what we do. So that's the type of intuition, a new future that we need. I'm not sure how the gentleman would like to fix it. I'm sure I'd like to be interested in what his thoughts are and how we should fix it, though. But I'm glad he asked the question.
Grab his arm and speak to him later.
Everybody's starting to get up and leave. Before they do that, before you leave, can you please help put everything away? It helps to get it cleaned up in a lot quicker time frame. But now we can go back if there's somebody with a question. I just wanted to bring that up.
I think we should.
But we have to dry mop the floor and a few things like that. So.
Okay, well, I think we're gonna wrap it up. So thank you all very much for coming out tonight. This is awesome. I'm really glad that there was people that, yeah. I'm really glad people are coming out to have the conversation who don't share my opinion. That's what this is all about. And please look to attend another one. Bring more questions, sir. I'd be happy to talk to you more via email or phone call. You can get my contact information before you leave. And also, I want to say I had a burger tonight from someplace here.
Burger bar.
And I got something to say about that burger. That was almost as good as mine. That was a really good burger. So, folks, yeah, if you need a snack, that's definitely a good place to go. The Burger Barn's up for sale?
Uh-oh.
Wow, interesting.
Ladies
All right,
and-
thank you, folks.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Our speakers for tonight, Chris, Scott, Shane, and John Reed. Thank you. If you want to see this, thank you for the online viewers from freedomcalendar.net and what is it? Let's Talk Alberta.com. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your evening. Thank you for being here.
All right, so thank you very much for tuning in. I will be tomorrow in Red Deer with the folks from the Levine show. I will be streaming from there. That's a very last call proposition. So thank you very much for tuning in. I will see you tomorrow at 7.